People is who matter the most in life. Whether we are talking personal lives, whether we are talking professional life, whether we are talking social life. And it is very often that we take people for granted, especially with people whom we are close, either at home or at work, or even in society. And therefore, we miss out in understanding people the way others expect us to. And it is a reciprocal feeling. Even others don't try to understand us as we want them to understand us. The idea of this session is that we want to, as the name suggests, conversations. We want to have a conversation with all of you who are attending today. And with me is Mr. Sumit Singh Arora, who is, as per my estimate, the best, or perhaps the most accomplished learning and development professional that I have met in my life. And I'm talking a reasonably long stretch of a corporate career post graduation. Over 3 decades and more, I don't think I have met anybody who's as accomplished as Sumit. Sumit, thank you for being with us on this program. So we began, if you recall, and those of you who are joining for the first time can find these videos on our Ideas Consulting Group YouTube channel. We began by talking about KPIs, KRAs, how do you set them, where do we go wrong? Then we took the next logical step in the previous month when we looked at appraisals. How do you appraise a person? And today somehow we have put a reverse gear, and we are now talking of how do you recruit correctly. As I mentioned, since the time I graduated, I have spent over 34 years in work life. And believe me, one of the biggest hidden costs that any organization sort of pays, or the price that an organization pays, is by incorrect recruitment. Look at the implication. You recruit a person thinking that the person is the best person to suit the role. It takes you 3 to 6 months to realize whether the person is actually best suited or there are a lot of gaps. And in the process, what has happened, the position has been manned, womaned by somebody who has not delivered as per the expectation of the role. And you paid the person. And then you start the search again. And the employee is never at fault. The employee will always blame the organization that you did not help me to settle down and perform the way you expect me to perform. And that's a very common employee emotion. And that actually creates a lot of negativity with the employee, within the organization, and in this world of social media, it is everywhere.
Once, please.
So what we want to do today, Sumit and I, is share our experiences in terms of recruiting definitely thousands of people, if not more, across various levels of hierarchies, across diverse industries, and across diverse sectors. When I say sectors, I am saying non-profit organizations versus profit organizations versus government, PSUs, everywhere. And right from CEO or MD, whatever, to the lowest level, we have got this experience of recruiting people. Now, what 2 or 3 things which I want to state upfront. First, you will never get somebody who's a perfect fit. Never. You must realize that if you are not going to get somebody who's perfect, you have to decide what are the imperfections with which you are willing to live with. So that needs thinking, that needs clarity of the job role, and that needs lot of scientific planning. Let me illustrate by a very simple example, something which is very obvious. Let's say a hospital is recruiting a nurse. Now, will you ever compromise on nursing skill? No. Perhaps you may compromise on a couple of other skills which you may look for in some other position in a hospital, but definitely not in a nursing skill. Even within nursing skills, there would be certain skills which are the basic skills. Let's say, for example, pushing in an intravenous injection, setting up a drip, and taking blood for a sample. So there are certain basic skills where you will not compromise. There could be certain advanced skills where you may believe that the person can learn based on training and as the person gathers experience. Let's say for making a channel on a patient's arm. Now, this criteria holds good if you are recruiting a nursing student right from college. However, if you are recruiting a nurse who has got 5 years of experience, nursing experience, I'm sure this skill also is mandatory. It cannot be could be good type of skill. So that's very important. That's point number one. Point number two, it is recruitment is just not about interviewing a candidate. There is much, much more beyond interview. Interview is one of the ways of assessment for recruitment. Depending on the role for which the person is being recruited, I think where organizations go wrong is not to create an assessment method by which they will pick up whatever they need to pick up, which is must, which is mandatory in the candidate during the assessment process. Let me give a personal example. I have worked for a multinational company which is in the pharmaceutical space. I will not name the company directly. However, you can perhaps guess it. It is one of the prime movers of the corona vaccine globally today. That company recruited me and few others in their marketing team. So, one of the things which caught our attention in the ad which had appeared in the newspaper, that was those were the days of advertising in newspapers for recruitment, said that they needed people who are MBAs, have marketing stroke selling experience, but not in the pharmaceutical industry. Subsequently, we understood the reason why this was so specific. And believe me, they recruited 5 of us, 4 of us were not from the pharmaceutical industry. And the process that they followed in terms of selecting us is something which I even today talk of very fondly. I joined that company in 1990. So that's many, many years back. For example, in a marketing person's role, one of the things that you need to think or need to assess is, can this person think outside the box? And how do you assess it? If they did it. The marketing person must have supremely talented in terms of written as well as verbal communication. They tested it. How? They had those methods. So the point that I'm trying to make through this illustrative example is that when you are recruiting for a position, you should be extremely clear about what are the competencies, what are the skills, and what are the qualifications that you are requiring. Of course, experience depending on the level of recruitment, that are on which you are not going to compromise, A. And B, what is that objective method of assessing whatever you are trying to do? I understand there may not be 100% every time for every skill or competency that you are talking about. Those also we have developed skills or tools by which one can do it objectively. So what we will do is we will take you through a sort of a trailer of what are the possibilities that you could consider while you are recruiting the next person. Sumit, let's move on to what is it that we are trying to matchmake in the process of recruiting.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepak. That was a wonderful opening, like
Thank
as
you.
in cricket we do. So this is the bystander on the second side, standing to talk to you about some basic thoughts on what matchmaking we really do into recruitment. We have an applicant on one side and you have the job role person on the other side. That is something which is the key when we really look at, isn't it? And what do we really match? That's a very important question which comes in. Any ideas? What all do we match between the job role and the applicant? क्या क्या match करते हैं हम? Any guesses which
Any
you like to
thoughts?
bring?
Please type in the chat box whatever you feel is
Yeah, you
to
can even
answer.
unmute and speak. No problems at all. So
The
yes,
requirements and the competencies. This is
wonderful.
Gargi.
Yes, the requirement of the job role and the competencies, that's the primary thing which comes in. Thank you, Garsi Ghosh. So the job
Gargi.
role
Thank you.
functions, what we really have to do, that's the first step which we really look at, and the competencies, the skills, right, Arup? Thank you for that input. So we are really looking at what are the workings which the job role has to do, what are the functions which in that job role a person has to do, and thus the person has the skills or the competencies as we call it. So the knowledge, the skill, the attitude, etc. Anything else we look forward, or this is done? Anything
Is that
else?
all, or is there something
No,
else?
no, there could be something else. Sorry, I'm speaking because it'll take a longer time to chat.
Yes, yes.
So
Go ahead.
there will be some organizational culture, some
Yes.
ethos, and it is very
Wonderful.
essential that at a very primary scale, I fit into it.
Wonderful.
One can't
Yeah.
understand everything about the organization, but
Wonderful.
overall, it's very important that I know whether I'm ready to work in a very modern, very young organization or
Wonderful.
in a very family driven kind of business. That overall fitment, I believe, is very important.
True,
Otherwise,
Gargi.
people will not
Yeah,
last.
so the culture fit is one part of it. Attitude is Arup saying the second part of it. As an HR, there is one more very important requirement, even
Arup
not just
also
in an
mentioned
HR.
communication skills. Arup also mentioned communication skills.
Yeah, communication skills as well. So there is one more requirement which we normally look at it is कि तेरे पास बंदा टिकता कितना है, right? So cultural fit and even the tikna part of it. In English, if we may call it, it's the longevity of the candidate. How long does the candidate stay in? Does he join in and move away in 3 months, 6 months? Then we call it as a failure of recruitment. A year, 2 years, we say, okay, आया सीखा निकल गया, right, and beyond. So how do you really look at that longevity in the candidate? So what do you really look that the person would remain in the organization or not? So on the right hand side, if you look at the arrow, it says aspirations versus need. Very true, Kabita Nayak, you very rightly said the need of the job for the applicant. So how much is the need for the job for the applicant? We have seen many a times, even in IT ITS companies, many engineers join in IT ITS companies. They are planning to do something else further, or even graduates who are planning to do maybe IAS, IES. They are trying for that examination. They are preparing, or even BCom students who are planning to become a chartered accountant. Till some time they want to take up a job. So if that is the aspiration, then you really know that's not possible. That
Not only
the
that,
candidate would
people
stay
try
long.
to change a job to relocate themselves,
Yeah,
and
so
it is
there's
something
also
like a stepping stone.
the geography part of it. The family lives in a city somewhere, and the person comes in, and then he says, "Okay, I'll think of bringing the family." Now that's also a very clear need aspect of it, which may match, which may not match, right? So very true, Kabita. Thanks for that. Then Arup says past tenure work diff experience, right? So what has been his previous way of looking at it also matters. Then next very important thing comes is the supervision cost, which many of us really skip. And that supervision cost is a very big cost. Imagine Deepak Pramani kind of a person with that kind of an experience, that kind of a value added. If he has to really work with the IT ITS guy, trying to guide him every day, or trying to work with a content developer, trying to give him so many hours, uh, the cost of the organization becomes very huge. And that's something which we have to really look at. Okay, how much is the manager's time this person is going to consume? And who is the manager? Is the manager the CEO? So when even you hire a EA to a CEO, you have to really see that a EA is so accomplished in his role that he doesn't need a lot of supervision cost. That is, he is willing to do that role. And that is where the supervision cost would be less, right? And the fourth element which we really look at is the cultural fitment, which ma'am said the first, and that's very true. We look at whether the person would fit into our organization or not is based on the personality, based on the aspirations, based on what that person brings in. So these are the four major elements which we look at as matching. Like in marriage, we say 36 gun milna. वैसा ही these are in recruitment. If you want to give some weightage to it, 8 points to each. So these are 36 points which should match with each other. And that is where we may say that everything is good. Now let's wait for luck to take over. Yeah. So any inputs, any suggestions, any points which you would like to bring about, please, or something which we may have missed, which you want us to add to it, feel free to contribute. This
I
is
just want to add
conversation.
to what Sumit said. See, the important point that we must remember that no individual, none of us in this world are perfect for every role. We must remember we are sort of assessing the fitment of the person to the job role that the person has to perform. The challenge begins because most of the organizations, including very large corporate organizations, they do not have a very structured definition of job role. Because if you do not have that, you will not be able to look at all the stuff that Sumit is talking about on the right hand side. There are organizations which believes that longevity is not a virtue. I need a person who will join me for 1 or 2 years, give the best and move on. I mean, there are recruitments like that, and that's a strategic recruitment which we need to do. For example, BPOs, look at people like that, because a person cannot do that repetitive work for a long time. So everybody will not get promoted. So people will move on. There is an attrition which is a part of the business, and that needs to be figured out as when we are going through. I hope we are giving enough examples for all of you to appreciate that it is just not getting somebody taking an interview and saying, okay, join. That's not the case.
Okay. So with these four elements of job role functions, longevity, supervision, cultural fitment to be mapped with the applicant's competency, skills, aspiration and needs, willingness, personality. So that's the why part of it, what we have to do, yeah? Why we have to do this. That's something which we have set. Now let's look towards the how part of it. Let's take this conversation a bit ahead and get some thoughts about the job selection process when we really look at it, right? So does the job role and selection process have some element of connection, or the selection process is same for entire job roles? As an organization, how do you really look at your selection process?
Please feel free to comment. Please feel free to write in the chat box. We want to hear from you. That is why we call this conversations, and it's not just a webinar where only we keep talking. Have you understood the question, all of you?
So when we do recruitment in our company for job roles, maybe it is a lower level or medium level or higher level or various departments, is the selection process the same, or should we have different selection process for various job roles?
No, the process, I believe, should be very different. One criteria, it is depending upon the seniority of the role, and thereby we'll take into account leadership criteria, the kind of management skills, etc. As also, I would look at different set of skill sets in somebody who's in a sales function vis-a-vis somebody who's in a back office role. So my requirements will be wholly different, but yes, some basic parameters I'm sure would remain completely the same, like integrity, the ability to mix with others, be a team player, such things.
Okay.
So for a second, you said integrity. The question is to everybody, how do you assess integrity in a selection process? It's a thought which I want to leave you with. Because we all talk of integrity and everybody wants a person whose integrity is high. How do we assess it? Are there any methods? Are there any tools? Is there a way you can measure integrity? I'm just leaving all of you with a thought and a question. And I would, as we go towards the end of the session, we will figure out how we can answer that question. Smith, you were saying something.
Okay, so there are a few more wonderful comments which have come in, as what Gagi says, that the process would be different. Joy has a different view. He says same process but different assessment tools he talks about. It's based on position and requirement according to job role, says Kabita. Thank you. Prashant brings in his views. He says leadership should be given more chances to present themselves on different case basis to judge their skill set. Wow. Again, anyone wants to debate these points, feel free. This is a conversation. Yeah. And during conversation, we can find out, says Arup, I believe this is the answer to your integrity question, Deepakda. We'll definitely handle this towards the end. And very true, like you all have brought in your inputs, which talk about job role and selection process. It means that there has to be an element of customization as per job role, right? And for that, I invite Deepakda to give in his views on what he means when we look at various functions or...
First and foremost, let's remember one thing. A job role means a role of a function. The person has to do something which is the function in that organization, and that function in that organization is different depending on the industry. Let me give an example. Let's take sales as a function. Sales as a function. Now, sales in an FMCG context, which is fast-moving consumer goods context, is absolutely different from a pharmaceutical concept, is absolutely different from a banking perspective, is absolutely different from a durable marketing perspective. So the point that I'm trying to make is, even though the functional role is the same, the industry in which the company is competing often determines what one needs to look for in the candidate. For an FMCG company, for example, a salesperson has to cover more number of outlets. Whereas in a pharmaceutical company, the person has to cover a lot of doctors. The durable companies will have to cover lesser number of outlets as compared to FMCG company, but must have much greater technical knowledge to explain the durables. So the point that I'm trying to make is that whatever be the function, you must test for it. In action tests, let me give you an example. Wherever Sumit and I are involved as a consultant or in whichever manner, where we talk of recruiting, let's say telecaller, a telecaller will never be interviewed in person. A telecaller will always be interviewed over the phone, because that is how people who matter, with whom she or he will converse, will listen to that person. So how does the person sound over the telephone? In basket exercise, I'm just taking the examples which are here. In basket exercise is the typical exercise that we do for recruitment of supervisory roles. See, as a supervisor, you have to handle a lot of mail. I am using the word mail. You can look at it in the soft copy form or in the hard copy form. And every mail or communication or correspondence that you receive, you cannot handle it at that moment. However, if you look at time management perspective, lot of people, they actually waste time by inappropriately handling correspondence, communication, and email. So we put them together through an in-basket exercise, which shows us what is the way the person is prioritizing. How is it taking decisions? No, I'm sure all of you are it's a decision which I have to take. I'll think about it later. Now, this procrastination is actually a time guzzler. I mean, any day if we do a time management session, then of course all of you are welcome, and then we'll talk about that. Sample work. For example, somebody mentioned about a case study for senior management. I mean, if the work is, for example, I am recruiting somebody who's an artist for a full-time recruitment, I will definitely give that person a brief and ask for the sample work. For example, tomorrow is World Earth Day. And if you guys are following us on LinkedIn, you will see our communication tomorrow on LinkedIn on this World Earth Day. And you will see it's absolutely different from anything that everybody else is doing. So the way the person is interpreting is not about the strokes of the brush, but it is about what the person, the way is interpreting the brief. And of course, trial is something which a lot of companies do. This is what about probations, induction, all those stuff comes under that. Aspirations. You know, if you ask, you know, we use a lot of behavioral economics in the work that we do. And one of the things that behavioral economics has taught us is that all of us, we think we are rational as human beings. We are far from that. And there are many ways and many reasons, and there's Nobel Prize winning work on that. One of the things that behavioral economics talks of is that depending on how you ask, you will get the type of answers that you deserve. I repeat, depending on how you ask, you will get the answer that you will deserve. Let's take an example. I am applying for a personal loan to buy a refrigerator. If the person sanctioning the loan asks me that will you return this loan, repay this loan, will I say no? Will anybody say no? Everybody will say yes, no. But does 100% people do 100% people pay back their loan? No. So how will you figure out whether this person is likely to run away with the money, or will he be genuinely paying back the money, is what is all about read between the lines. So that's a little more advanced. How do you ask? What do you notice? For example, one of the things that we do is, I will never take an interview or a conversation where I cannot see the person. In fact, if it is a physical interaction, those of you who have seen a very interesting movie called Special 26, where Akshay Kumar and Anupam Kher are recruiting people, you would see that the person comes in from the door to the chair where the candidate comes and sits the long distance. That walk tells a lot. And the chair where the person has been asked to sit exposes the entire body of the person. And as the person responds to the conversation, the body language actually says 55% of what the communication he is saying. So we need to understand how we can read between the lines. There are a lot of things that we need to do. Sumit, next. Willingness. Sumit has a very favorite matrix called the skill will matrix. Someday, if we do some work on people management, all of you will hear from us about skill will matrix. We have always believed that a person with a slightly lower level of skill, but a higher degree of will, is much more successful than a person who may have a far greater skill, but very limited or fragile will. I respect all the cricketers who have played for India and have done well, but I believe few cricketers have not been able to live up to the potential that they were or they could have because of the lack of will. The classic example is Vinod Kambli, who came into the limelight in the same newspaper article which put Sachin Tendulkar into limelight for the first time. Kambli had a reasonably successful career, but look at Sachin, what he achieved and what Kambli achieved. What is the longevity that he had in terms of an international cricketer? And I tell you, it was totally because of will. And this is where we need to look at the type of questions that we frame, which is about behavior of the people who's posing as a candidate. You know, we also have some advanced tools. We have a research from the top universities in the world where we have identified 12 behavioral traits which are required for different work job role, and it's a combination of that, but that's very advanced. That may not be possible. Preparedness. Let us look at a very simple thing as preparedness. And let me give a very bottom of the pyramid example. Let's say you have invited a candidate where you have mentioned that you please bring your original documents A, B, C, D, E when you come for the interaction. Now, there will be people who have got some, people who haven't got any, people who have got some photocopies. So this preparedness itself tells a lot about the candidate's willingness to perform. There are umpteen examples. We have time is limited, and therefore we must look at limited examples. But I hope we are able to set a flavor of what we are saying. And of course, personality. There are psychometric tests, may not be possible. How do you filter for willingness and aspiration, which is trying just for the interview? That is where you would have to read between the lines, Shloks. That's why the body language becomes important. The moment you start, you are able to interpret body language. The moment you are able to interpret between the lines, you will be able to distinguish between chalk and cheese. Sumit and I did a very interesting work on this handwriting analysis with some managers in an organization as a part of an HR audit. Believe me, when we gave the feedback to these managers, they were aghast as to how a handwriting of a person could say so much about that person's personality, about the way he believes in things, what he believes, does not believe, and which are the gray areas. Now, these are tools which you cannot use everywhere. However, and this is only a few, handful of them that we have listed out here. There are much, much more. But let me tell you one thing. There is no substitute to experience. When I started recruiting, or when Sumit started recruiting, we were not trained as much as we get to train today. We have developed ourselves through our experience. We have compiled the information that we have gathered. You know, observation during an interview is one of the critical roles of the person who is taking the interview. And we really do not do that. We ask a question, we look down, look somewhere else, some people do the phoning, and that's not done. Those of you who are facing an interview, your observation of the person who is interviewing you can give you a lot of insights in terms of whether you are able to make a bridge or not. Smith.
So in summary, when we look at as per job role, 4 things which would remain common are the functions, aspiration, willingness, and personality. Whatever job roles you look at, you would be wanting to evaluate the person on this, and the methods would change depending upon how much emphasis you have for that job role on these 4 parameters, right? So with your permission, shall we take it on to the next question, and a very important question which comes in mind. Who all should interview? Like, who should be the people in the interview panel? Not who all should we interview, but who all should be the people who should be in the interview panel. What do you think?
Add a twist to what Smith said. Where should the interview be conducted by one person versus a panel?
Yeah. So right. Any views, any things which you want to bring in, please. So forum is open for your views, your thoughts on who all should interview the candidate. Should it be one person? Should it be multiple people? What are your views on this?
Or would it depend on the job role? Yeah. Could be.
Yes.
Well, if I may be permitted to say, from personal experiences, I think not only me, but many of us have often felt, what is this person doing here interviewing me? While the seniority of the person interviewing, of course, is, I guess, an organizational criterion, but not always correct. So I really don't know how to answer this question. But one thing I know, that it's very difficult, or rather it should be very important to the organization to figure this out, because often very senior people sit across the table and their way of talking is boring, or they are talking about things which are not very relevant or very theoretical, not related to the job. So I would say, and this may sound a little naive, but I think the person taking the interview should be a people-friendly person, even if he's in a department like a finance, where he doesn't have to interact with too many. And secondly, he should be a little intelligent. Maybe I sound a little off the mark while I say this, but this is what I feel very strongly about.
Sumit, a lot of comments which you may like to read.
Yeah. So Gagi has a very clear point of view that the person in the interview panel should be capable person, right? He should be intelligent is something which he very clearly mentions out. It depends on the knowledge and the experience of the interviewer as well. Yes, Arup, when you have to check knowledge tests, if you want to really do in an interview, you may want to have somebody on an interview panel who has the knowledge and the experience relevant to the topic. However, knowledge test can be done in many other ways than interview too. Panchatpa has a very important point. It could be a panel comprising of the department head, HR, and the supervisor. Wow. So here we have multiple levels. We have even the department head, we have the HR person and a supervisor looking into it. Prashant has a similar, Prashant Sahu, thank you. Always a panel is better. Yeah, is a single head. It may be for executive of officers. Selection is important for organization. BC says it depends on the job responsibility and organization stature. Interviewer face one or many interview. True. Many organizations, like if you look at government organizations, you always have a panel. And we always laugh about it. They have a panel because they do not want to take up responsibility of wrong selection. So how did it happen? We had 10 people and they decided together. So it is a committee for everything, right? Two people should interview. Well, yes, that's another thought process which comes in. If a single interviewer does not have the knowledge, he can take help. It depends on the job responsibility and organization structure. Interview faces one or more. The immediate senior and the head of the department. Wow. I would like to add, if we depend on the single interviewer's knowledge and skills, that it would be risky, better to have a panel. Awesome, Prashant. So here we come across points that, Deepakra, should I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So a reporting manager is the one main person who has to take the interview. Yes, he is the person who is going to get work done. So he has to have the right of selecting or rejecting a person. The human resource manager is the second person, and basically a human resource manager comes from the point of view of various tools of behavioral intervention or various tools of observation of various people whom he has done. Like if I were a reporting manager, I would have how many people would I have recruited in my lifespan of 10 years or 5 years of experience, maybe 10, maybe 20, and the human resource manager might have hired or been in the part of the recruitment process of maybe 100 people or 200 people or more than that. And that's something where we really look at a second experience or a second point of view coming in. The third, yes, very rightly said, that the department head or the reporting manager's manager. So one level up, who really looks at in some other views which comes in. Any other person which comes to mind? These three people are sufficient or do we need more? So you have the
Not for
functional
all,
team.
in some cases.
Pardon?
Not for all, but maybe in some cases.
Yeah, in some cases, would we have a few more people?
While
Or
you
these three would be sufficient for a panel?
While you're thinking about the answer with Sumit, to the question with Sumit, I suppose, let me add one dimension, which we do not normally consider in India. Abroad, the interviewer's time that is invested in interviewing a candidate is considered a cost to company. And therefore, what people have done is for the entry point level of recruitment, first few sets are done online, which is humanless. So a person faces the camera, a question comes, the person answers as if he's answering to a person sitting in front. And therefore, that is a dimension which I think we must all consider as to who is investing time in the interview process or the selection process, and what is the cost of that person's time, because this is coming at the cost of something else. So therefore, that dimension is often missed out. Psychometric analysis, Joy, is being used in many places. The only challenge in psychometric analysis is it's one size fits all. You do not get too many psychometric tools which can be customized to the position hierarchy role. And I will not name any one of them because most of them come, okay, this is a test. Anybody who, from a managing director to a frontline manager, takes the same test and you get a score.
True.
Now the interpretation is of course important, that has benchmarks, but the customization is lacking, which is in a way a limitation.
So coming back
Okay,
to back to the point of the people who can be involved in interviewing, one very important element which I've seen in many places are the peers. So if that person has to work with certain team members, the manager doesn't take the responsibility of saying, hey guys, I have got you another team member to work with. He brings in one or two key people who are going to work with this person to understand from their point of view, what do they think about it. And I have seen even in schools and in many organizations that the reporting team also gets a chance to converse with the shortlisted candidates before one of them is selected. I've seen this happening very wonderfully where the heads of the teachers, the supervisors actually discussed with 3 principals probable, and one of them got shortlisted based on the inputs even from the supervisors. Believe that? So, and of course, in organizations which are really wonderful, they even have customers' view on candidates before taking them in customer-centric roles as well. So if you look at who all should interview, it's not mandatory that all these 6 people have to interview. The person who is affected by the candidate and the person who would take charge of the candidate, these 2 people are key important. Third is, yes, the subject matter expert who, if required, should be a part of the interview. Any suggestions?
The group is very useful in IT, schools, where you have to work with a lot of people like yourself. And therefore, the culture. Sir, I have only one question. If applicant received 45% from his reporting manager, he also got 35 something. Sumit is written that you have to read the full question. But before that, so the point that I'm trying to make is that the culture fitment becomes one of the ways of assessing that is through this peers and the reporting team interaction. We don't call them interviews, we call them interactions, because it is not, the setting is different. It is not that you sit across, there are a variety of ways of doing things which we do, right?
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And the question which BC has asked,
35%,
yes, I'll just talk about that. There's a wonderful question which has come from BC for a panel interview where there is difference of opinion about certain candidates. And that's very true. It would always be there. And that is the reason why we invite a panel, that we can see difference of opinion. And there are processes to handle difference of opinion. Percentage may not be the very right thing to do it. We could always have like strongly recommend, not recommend, and strongly reject. So these could be the 4 areas or 4 ways how you really mark a person. And if it is strongly recommend and recommend ke beech mein everybody is there, you could always choose that person. And if there is somebody who is rejecting out of the panel, then there is a veto kind of a thing. If you want to really have that in a panel, whether if one of the panelists vetoes a person of not to select, not to recommend, not recommended, then we may have a rule saying that we would not select him. And the selection, this kind of a small protocol or a rule over a panel can easily be formed. It is not very difficult, unless otherwise, as panelists, we do not talk with each other and we have a lot of ego. So that needs to be solved in a different place. Your experience on the panel part of it, Deepakta, you have been part of panels.
And add to what Sumit said. You know, when we put together a panel, We depend on each individual's own expertise and experience to judge the person. We normally do not string the panel together through a methodology based on which each member of the panel will score. And that becomes the biggest challenge. And it is not just one thing. So you have to be very clear as to why this panel, who is comprising that panel and why. What do we want the panel to assess and score upon? How will we look at the extremes? Total reject, fantastic. And how do you come? So there are a variety of parameters. So there again comes the priority, go, no go parameter. This parameter I will not compromise. This parameter I am willing to take a little bit of a challenge. So the point that I'm trying to make is that unless you structure the assessment tool or the scoring method which the panel will use as a part of the discipline, panels are of very little use.
Sure.
It doesn't work.
I'll just sum this up with Deepak Das one experience which he had shared with me as a part of panel. Even if the panel says no, and if the reporting manager or the CEO of the organization takes upon him to recruit a person, then what do you really do? And that's a very critical situation, which calls for then is who is calling the shots, right? And who is taking the risks, or who would pay for a miracle or a debacle. And that's something which as panelists with experiences, you really come upon. We see you have really touched upon something which is a very sensitive discussion and which can take us on a very big tangent. I would seek your permission to take this ahead. And thank you for bringing up that question. That's really an important question. Okay, so with this comes a very important question. Is recruitment all about selection or rejection? Is it an art or is it a science, or how do you really look at selection or rejection? Yeah. So let me bring the next slide on, which talks about the parameters on which you should select and on which you should not reject, right? And let's see one at a time. Deepak, yours. I'll just open all four.
What perhaps listening from us today is not available on Google in the way we are talking. Some of it bits and pieces will go in. What we are bringing in is our experience of selecting people. And please note the word, I'm using the word selecting and not interviewing. Right? Because interview is one of the methods which we use for selecting. It is not but the only method at all times. In some cases, it may be the only method. However, we must look at the selection or recruitment more holistically than just taking an interview. And I think that's a very fundamental paradigm which must shift in the minds of most of us. We say we don't have the time, who will do all this, after that anyway we will get that type of a candidate that we deserve. All that is just not acceptable. Because if you do not put in the efforts while recruiting, you may incur a lower cost of recruiting, but in the long run, mark my words, you will pay a much higher price of making the wrong selection. So is it a question of selection or rejection? It is a balance. And how do you do it? What do we look for when selecting? The first and foremost is attitude. If a person has everything and does not have the attitude which is required for that job role, you can get the best person, it will never work. Second, every person is entitled to his or her aspirations. If as an organization, as a recruiter, I cannot help that person pursue his or her aspirations, I am very clear we must not recruit that person. Let me give an example from my personal life. When I decided to get married, my parents asked me that what type of a girl do you want? Do you want a working lady or you don't want a working lady? I said, I don't mind the working lady, but I cannot marry a career woman. And my reasons were very clear, that if I marry a lady who needs to pursue her own career, and for the sake of her career, if she has to stay away from me, I must be, as a spouse, willing to make that sacrifice. And I was clear that I don't want to make that sacrifice, and therefore I didn't want to sort of bottle up the aspiration of somebody who's trying to be with me lifelong. So the point that I'm trying to make is you must be very clear about the aspirations of the person, and you must be able to support the aspirations if you really want to make the recruitment work for you. Willingness. Now, what is the difference between willingness? What is the difference between attitude and willingness?
Sorry, could not hear you.
What is the difference between attitude and willingness? All right.
So
attitude is much more at a higher plane than willingness. I am willing to work hard, but my attitude doesn't support me if I don't get success.
You will show me
I am willing to work hard and not get results, and I am willing to put in more hard work is an attitude. So we must be very clear between willingness and attitude. Both are important. And exposure. Exposure is something, see, at the point of attitude is how you look at things, and address it, and willingness is the want of it. Panchatappa, you are right. It's a little more evolved than that. Let's not get into it. That's a big thing. And attitude is one area. If I get into, I'll speak for next couple of hours. Exposure. Now, what do you mean by exposure? Exposure to me is not about only the organization that a person may have worked for or the academic institutions that the person has been. Let me give an example. If I am recruiting a person for a traveling salesperson's job, and I have to choose between two candidates, one person who's a child of a person working in the armed forces and therefore has traveled the length and breadth of the country every 2 years, versus somebody who has been born and brought up in the same house for 24 years and has gone to the college which is walking distance. If both of them are equal, I'll choose the first, because of the exposure that the person brings in to the job role that one is looking for. So if I am looking for somebody who will do an accounting function, that army background may not have that much of an edge vis-a-vis somebody who has gone to one place. So again, it's all about the role that you're selecting for, and the exposure is about what the person has been doing. One of the things that I am looking for at this stage, especially in the last 1.5 years, is when people are actually enrolling for random certification programs, because they are coming cheap, they are coming from reputed universities, who all have done what type of certification during this time is actually an indication of exposure, is also an indication of willingness to learn, is also this thing about aspiration. It's also an indicator of attitude. So the point that I'm trying to make is one needs to pick up things which are there. Some of them are obvious, some of them are apparent. The important point is not only to look at the obvious, but also to look at the apparent. And we'll demonstrate that as we go forward. So, how many minutes? We don't have much time. We may overshoot the session by around 15 minutes. Is that okay with everybody? Instead of 4:30, we'll finish at around 4:45 or 5. If you are okay with it, please say yes, because we have just got into it. All right. What you should not reject for? Qualification. We are currently helping one of our clients to recruit people for their BD team. Now, they are a manufacturing client. So one of the criteria that we have given is that the person should have an engineering background, right? Preferably mechanical or metallurgy. We have found a CV where this person has got extremely relevant experience in BD in similar industry, but is a diploma engineer and not a graduate engineer. in mechanical. I am pushing hard in that organization to recruit that person. Even though the MD is very rigid that no, if he doesn't have a degree, I will not take. So my logic is different. My logic is if you are taking that person to run your machines, you may look for a degree as the minimum criteria. If you are looking for him to sell what you are manufacturing, where he can have a meaningful technical conversation with your customer, there more than the technical conversation, you need the competencies for that person in terms of the BD skills rather than the technical skills, and therefore you must take that person. So the point that I'm trying to make is qualification is to be looked at in context to the role, and it cannot be a rejection criteria. Personality. You can build a brand in premium leather goods, and it was a big success story. Whenever we do branding seminars, we talk about that. There, we had to recruit somebody to work with modern trade, like shopper stops, pantaloons, etc. The lady who came for the interview, she did not look pretty. Let me put it that way. She was, I mean, men will not look at her twice because of her looks. So the personality, you asked me, was not impressive. And I had to really force the owners to recruit her because her all other competencies were what we wanted. And believe me, she became the most important asset of the organization. Often we reject people based on how they look, and personality is just not about looks. And that is where a lot of people make mistakes. I look like any other old man. But I believe I have a personality which I consider is magnetic, desirable, and that's because of the totality of me. So personality is not about looks alone. Personality is what is the entire individual. Aptitude. In today's changing world, and the virus has just reinforced this point, that people do not have the right aptitude to learn, will become passengers as we go forward. You need people who have the aptitude that is required for the job role. So for example, if you are looking at a person with in the logistics function of an organization, the person should have a favorable aptitude towards basic mathematics. If the person doesn't have that aptitude, you are making a wrong choice. So depending on let's say you are recruiting somebody for customer care, the basic aptitude should be of that being where I am willing to listen to people. Because in customer care, listening is more important than talking. If the person doesn't have the aptitude to pick up finer skills to make the customer feel more and more wanted, then you are not going to recruit that person in customer care. If you are recruiting somebody for a faculty position in a training institute, if the person doesn't have the aptitude to teach, the aptitude to handle difficult students, then you are making the wrong choice. So what we need to do is we must look at the aptitude that is required or could be developed. And aptitude should not be a criteria for rejection if it is found to be correct. Experience. I got campus selected by a paint company in sales. After that, I worked in that multinational pharma company in marketing. Then I worked in a media company, initially in brand management and then as the business head. So, I mean, my previous experience was no use, apparently, to the job that I had applied for. However, what was common to all my experiences was things to do with strategy, things to do with communication, things to do with extensive traveling, hard work, things to able to influence people. Those were the common factors which saw me through where I went today. So experience should be looked at. Often people say, no, he is not from the industry. I put the other way around. If you get a marketing person in a media industry who has got marketing experience in FMCG, he will not take anything for granted in the media industry. And if you look at it, Unilever contributes maximum MDs across industries. Why? Because the experience that people have in Unilever is found to be extremely beneficial to bring in new thinking, new processes, new orientation, new outlook. It's very, very different. So experience should be looked at in terms of the relevance of the job role and not in terms of only the industry in which the person has done it. Any question on this slide? I spoke for a little too long. Hopefully, I haven't put too many people into sleep with all the videos of I can't even make out. Any questions, any comments on this slide? No, sir. Kavita has said no, sir. Fantastic. Selecting for point we can't change, but we can change all the things which is mentioned, not reject. Yeah, you're right, VC. You know, as I began by saying that you cannot get a perfect fit. So if you are clear about what you are willing to live with and what you are not going to compromise with, you will 9 out of 10 times get your selection or rejection.
Okay. So summing it up, if you do not get the person, with right experience, don't just reject him, look at his exposure. If you don't get the person with the right aptitude, look at his willingness to learn, to improve. Does he really look at it? If the person has the right aspirations, he will modify his personality. You really do not have to really look at कि personality nahi hai iska. He would do awesome things. We have seen that even in sales. Personality nahi hai bande ki sales ki, but he becomes such a wonderful sales guy that you really cannot just say कि theoretically तो ये बंदे ने output नहीं देना चाहिए, but ये दे रहा है पता नहीं क्यों. And that's something which you have seen many a times happening. And also is the part of qualification, that a person doesn't has the right qualification, but he has the attitude to build himself, to learn, to conquer. And that's where we really look at that. Focus on these four and don't look at these four as points for rejection. Okay, so permission granted to take us to look at something which is beyond the obvious, shall we? And why we are talking about this beyond the obvious is like we are talking with managers, with HR guys, we are talking with people who are on this side of the table. There are a lot of people who are on the other side of the table as well, right? So nowadays the candidates are prepared. The candidates take a training of 15 hours, 20 hours, 100 hours on how to face an interview, how to write a resume. And that is something which makes it really difficult even for the recruiters on this side to look at if this resume is a canned resume or is there something original in it? Is there something natural in it? Is it something which I would really like to look at it? I've seen resumes coming out in mass where everyone has the same career aspirations and many times everybody has the same hobbies too. So they are kind of copy pasted across, or with the use of technology, it is save as, and you kind of use the Control H button to find and replace, and you replace Sumit with Deepak, and the next resume is ready, and it is pushed across to recruiters. Now, if that is the case, as recruiters, we have the next important challenge to look beyond the obvious. And one of the important things which we have to really look forward is to look at the elevator pitch. Now, what I'm going to do in this slide is I'm going to talk from the candidate perspective of how the candidate prepares, and Deepak Da will talk about how we have to really look beyond the obvious. So a very important question which comes up is, which every candidate is waiting for, is please tell me about yourself. And that is where the elevator pitch comes in. So candidates are now ready with a 2-minute elevator pitch, that is tell me about yourself, a 5-minute pitch, and they have been trained, they have practiced, they have made videos, and they have taken feedback, and they have put in action verbs, they have put in achievements, they have put in positive words which really bring out a sequence. And now to control the interviewer, the next thing which in an elevator pitch they are taught is that towards the end, you should bring in those things which the interviewer would, you want the interviewer to focus on for the next question. So then you are in the control of the interview, right? Now, all this preparation the candidate comes with, not all, a few of them, or a few of them who are really
Do
serious
that.
about
Many of
making
them try to do that.
yeah. And if they have learned all this, how do you see beyond obvious? And that's where I'll put Deepak Da into the
You
question.
know what? First and foremost, you will know whether the person has memorized and spoken or not. That is with experience you can pick up. I mean, very simple. Would you like to look at a person who's memorized and spoken versus who's speaking more spontaneously? Is the first distinction that I make. Second distinction I make is a point we called about preparedness that we spoke about as a part of the one of the slides. So does he reflect preparedness? For example, if the person knows that I am the interviewer, and if he has done a LinkedIn search about me, and he slips that in beautifully in his conversation, he can't say, "Sir, I know my brother, cousin brother's father-in-law was your classmate in that institute." That will not work. However, if he says that, "Sir, I know you are from this institute, and day before yesterday in the papers, your institute alma mater, so and so was in the news for this thing," you realize that this person has gone beyond what is obvious, right? Third, and this is something which is very fundamental. I want to say everything that I want to about myself. But Sumit, as the recruiter, what does he want to hear from me about me, which is not there in my resume, but what is relevant and will help him in selecting me for the role that the person is doing? That is crucial. If you see those elements, then you know that this person applies his mind. He has got the right aptitude and the right willingness to prepare himself or herself for the role. And the last but not the least, one must pick up from one of the points which the person has said. Typically, let's say somebody says, "I have been to St. Xavier's, Kolkata, I have done my BCom there." In which year? This year. So one question could be, so St. Xavier's College, in which year was it established? As an alma mater, are you expected to know? So you can really throw people off guard. Now, the answer is not 1928. That's not important. But the guy, if he says, "Sir, I'm not very sure of the year, but it is in 1920s," that's for sure. You know the guy knows. We are here not to check memory. We are here to check perceptiveness. We want to figure out what the person is beyond what he is saying and beyond what is written in the CV. So there are many things that we can do on the elevator pitch. The elevator can keep going up and up and up and never come to an end. A lot of people, they subsequently, when they have got recruited, they said that, "I was hoping I had a gun in my hand and I could have shot you when you were trying to interview me." I have received such feedback. And to me, that is appreciation.
One of the wonderful points which I've seen Deepak Da interview and cut across the elevator pitch is to connect with the resume the certain points which the candidate has purposefully not mentioned in his elevator pitch and talk about that. And that I've seen as far as the year of qualification or a missing year somewhere in his description, or talking a very little about certain organization where he had worked a little bit or not. And when you pick up certain points, you throw the person out balance, and those are the questions where the elevator preparedness goes out and the real thing comes in. And that's something which I've seen sharp recruiters talk most. Next very important question which everybody prepares is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And I've seen again canned strengths as well and canned weaknesses as well. In the sense, the same answer, smart answer, that weaknesses is something which I'm working on it and I know about it, is something which you should answer. And about strengths, you should say something which is relevant to the job role. And certain people are really customizing it per job role, and certain people aren't. And the beyond way of looking at it, Deepak Da?
Okay. My experience is ask a person what is your strength and weakness. 9 out of 10 people begin with the weakness. Sir, I'm not good at this. And that weakness is something which is very generic. People tell me I am very emotional. Now that's a very generic statement. I am little soft to my people who work with me. Now those are not weaknesses. First of all, we have been using, we have used deliberately this word weakness in today's context because that's a more popular word. What Sumit and I use normally is a word called areas of improvement, and there's a logic behind it that we'll talk about. But the point that I'm trying to make is, I mean, those of you every day, if you do some work that we do on selling skills and all, you will see that we talk of that I have got so many things to talk about myself. How do I pick up only those which is relevant for this conversation? That is the strength. And the weakness, let me give an example from the pharma industry. The company which I worked for was one of the most ethical companies in the world. And as marketing people, there was the statutory requirement that if you look at an A4 size sheet for communication, minimum so many inches of height will be on summary of prescribing information and contradictions and side effects. Correct? Now we used to say, no, why do we have to say all this? The logic was simple. If you want the doctor to prescribe the drug confidently, he needs to understand what it can do, which is beneficial, what it can do, which it could lead a patient into side effect, so he can take those precautions while prescribing the drug. And therefore, the probability of him being happy after using the drug will be higher. Now, why I'm giving this as an analogy? It is important that we must come up and tell us weaknesses which are likely to be important for the recruiter to know in context of the job that we are applying for. Example, I am applying for a sales role. And what is my weakness? I can say, sir, I am extremely fluent in English when it comes to conversations. However, my one area where I am weak and I'm trying to improve is the way I write my emails. I know that is an important area for the role that I am trying to do. I may rate myself at around 6 out of 10. See, I am rating myself. So 6 is not bad, but I'm creating a perspective. I may rate myself on a written communication at 6 out of 10, whereas in verbal communication, I may rate myself at 7.2. So see how I have converted a weakness into something which gives an assurance, which gives that reflection of attitude, reflection of aptitude about a person. Are we clear?
Yeah. So I'll just add a small point over here. I've seen very smart recruiters ask strengths and weaknesses in the Google form along with the resume. And when a person fills in the Google form, he doesn't really recall everything, or he's not taken a printout of it, but the interviewer has a printout of it. And he brings out some other strength and says, Joy, this is something which you mentioned as your strength. Please elaborate on it. And if I do not recall what strength I have written, I may talk about a strength which I have not mentioned in the Google form. And that's something which is a very, very cunning way of picking up whether the person was really right about putting or not.
Excellent, Sumit. I just want to add, one of the things that I have always mentioned in an interview situation, be always honest. Mark Twain has said that I never tell the lie so that I don't have to remember what I have said. And this Google form example in Sumit gave is exactly that.
Sure. So
don't try to be what you are not. It doesn't work.
Second is they give a rating scale even in the Google form to say from 1 to 10, put up your score, what Deepak Das said very rightly. And if a person puts it 3 or 4 or 5, they treat it as a weakness and talk about it. And the person may not be really thinking, okay, this is a weakness which I'm talking about, and do I have a plan set for it or not? And the unpreparedness of it comes out. So these are various ways of looking beyond obvious, because we are talking with managers and HR over here, and this is something which keeps us better than others.
Nova, we are taking questions.
Yeah.
Nova, you can ask questions, of course. Let's continue.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Okay. So
Ask. Nova, please. Nova wants to ask a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sir, few months back, I was doing a training on DISC, right? Where the trainer was telling, and there was a chapter of interview skill. And what they were telling in the DISC, there are 5-10 questions, which the trainer told that managerial position, when they're interviewing, they can take, when the candidate is waiting at the reception arena, they can submit or give this 5 or 10 questions to the candidate, wherein we can analyze or we can have an idea of what the actual nature of this particular candidate. For example, if he's CD or if he's IS, so it will give me as an interviewer a notion wherein I would be able to understand or judge whether they are a right kind of fit for the requirement. Is this process, do you validate this kind of process? Number one. And number two, I would like to get an answer from your side. Like, how do you want us to do ref check?
Okay, we have that. Okay, let me answer the first question first. Nova, it is absolute no for me.
Okay.
If, as a selector, you get pre-sensitized to a person,
Mm-hmm.
you will look for that and may miss out on something else.
Okay.
That's point number one. Here, what is the basic assumption? The basic assumption that what is reflecting in the DISC score is actually the true nature of the person. Am I right? But depending on when you are taking the test, what frame of mind you are in, what are you going through, the test results will vary for the same person. So if you over rely on that and you guide your assessment based on that, 9 out of 10 times you will go wrong. The point is you have to approach a candidate with a total open mind. The moment you have any pre-biases, it will only destroy you as a selector. It will do nothing to the candidate. You may actually get the candidate totally wrong if you do that. And reference check is something which we'll talk about as we go forward. That's important. We'll come to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just bring in the 3 questions next to look at beyond obvious, and we'll just couple them together and talk about it. Like, tell us about your previous job or the last job. People prepare for it very wonderfully. They know what to say, how to talk good about the boss, how to talk good about the role, about the achievement, and not to blame the job. So that is something which they come as prepared. Why should we select you is another thing which many candidates come prepared, not all, but quite a few of them who are really serious about it. They really come to prepare. They come prepared with what the job role is and how their competencies match with the job role, and they look forward to it. And why do you want to change your job? These are a few twist or googly questions which used to be googly. Now they are out. People know that these are questions which are going to come in, so they come prepared. So what do you really do to understand more about the person's willingness, aspirations, about joining the job is the question which comes to you, Deepak.
Okay, let me just take one by one. Last job. Depending on the level that you are applying, you must have certain knowledge about what you are doing there. For example, if you are in sales, one of the questions which I often find people have no clue about is what is the market share of your brand in the market that you are competing. No idea. And if you're a sales manager, if you don't know that, you don't know your job. So what I am essentially emphasizing upon is, depending on the role for which you are recruiting, depending on the background of the candidate that the person is coming in, you must ask extremely pointed and pertinent questions from the CV that is mentioned. Let me give another example. People will say that I have grown the business from 100 to 500 in 2 years. Big point. So ask him, what did you do to move from 100 to 500? And what the person will say will be able to help you to interpret, is it because of the person or despite the person? Again, something very favorite of mine, those of you know me personally. And it is very important for us to judge whether the guy is taking credit because of what he or she has done, or is he taking credit because it has happened that way. That is the other point. Why should we select you? Very typical question. I have faced that. I have told you I've been into 3 industries. When I was shifting from pharma to media, they said, what do you know about media? I said, nothing. So why should we select you? It was a very obvious question. So I gave a very simple answer. I said, see, you are picking me up for marketing. I know a little bit of marketing based on the marketing experience that I have got in 2 industries. I will perhaps ask you something which you are doing in marketing in media very stupidly, like an idiot, that why are you doing this? Can it be done differently? And that question could actually change the entire marketing plan for the brand. They had no answers. So why should we select you? So it depends on how convincing. The conviction in the candidate's expression is very important to understand. Why do you want to change your job? You have to decipher between what is a genuine reason versus what is a flimsy reason. When I was changing, I wanted to come back to Kolkata from Mumbai. And that was my only reason why I was harping that why I want to change. And I was changing industry. At a certain stage, the CEO who was a part of the panel asked me, but we are thinking about you for in Bombay. So I said, fine, I'll join. Then she thought that she has got me on the wrong foot. She said, but all this while you were saying that you want to change the job because you want to come to Calcutta. So I said, yes. So then how are you willing to join in Bombay? I said, see, so long that the mother brand that you are marketing in the media is what the brand is, it can only be marketed in Bengal. So therefore, even if I join in Bombay, which is a regional office, I would like to put in my efforts and grow. And I would like, then I will migrate to Calcutta because everybody grows towards the head office. As opposed to where I am, I'm supposed to go to New York. So the point that I'm trying to make is you have to have that logic, that passion, that conviction, that confidence is what you have to look for when you are asking these questions. And that is what will help you differentiate between a candidate who is genuine, who could be relevant to the role that you are looking at, versus somebody who's trying to fake, slope your question, or trying to pretend that the person is a suitable candidate for the role that you're looking at.
True.
So maybe we have to perhaps expedite. We have 8 minutes.
We are on the last slide now. Post this, we'll get into the final concept we want to talk about. And if you have anything to tell us over here, what you really do to look beyond the obvious, we are open to your inputs, to your suggestions. You could type in the chat. You could unmute and tell us how you look beyond the obvious of the candidate. And then we come to the summary slide, maybe. Deepak, I want to take the resumes or the summary slide. How do you want to go?
Go to the summary slide. No point going
summary to the slide. Okay. So let me take you to the summary slide, which we want to bring to you.
You have kept 2 resumes which you wanted to demonstrate, but time doesn't permit us to do that, because if we get into the analysis, we have to give a lot of time for that. Someday, if you are doing a more proper workshop, we will do this. Would you like to talk, or should I talk on this?
I'll just take the tip of the iceberg and then you can take it below, and then we can add points as and where we want to. If you really look at this figure, which is an awesome compilation of how you really do a recruitment. And as it says very clearly, we many a times look at the tip of the iceberg and we are like in. And what do we look in the tip of the iceberg? We really look at resume and the interview, 2 things which kind of talk about the C-level, which we are able to see, and then we select the candidate. And what we get is something which is below. And that is the real thing which we get. And then we are kind of frustrated sometimes, or kind of happy also sometimes, because the unknown may not be always pleasure, maybe sometimes shocking. So when you look at the top of the iceberg, and many people look at the resume, and I have seen recruiters make a judgment, ye bilkul sahi candidate, isko bula lo. So they are actually looking at the tip of the iceberg, and they are seeing all what the candidate wants them to show them. And they're seeing only what the candidates wants to show them, right? Maximum of it, because resume itna pyara hota hai, itna acha dikhta hai. Everything is so properly set. The candidate has spent 10 to 20,000 rupees getting a professional resume created by multiple agencies, and then he picks and chooses and creates something which is awesome. We are kind of sold to the brochure and we say yehi product chahiye. Deepak da, your views?
Okay. Resume is like the drawing room of a house. What it reveals is suggestive. What it hides is vital. I'm sure you've walked into homes where the drawing room is straight out of a Ekta Kapoor serial or a Bollywood movie. But you step into a kitchen, you step into a toilet, you step into a bedroom, and you see what is the underbelly of the entire house. Right?
Open a cupboard and see.
Sorry?
Open a cupboard and see.
Open a cupboard and see. So resume is actually like हाथी के दांत जो दिखते हैं और उसके बेसिस पे आप हाथी के बारे में कुछ सोच सकते हो, लेकिन वो दांत से वो हाथी कभी खाता नहीं है. What you can't see is the teeth which actually helps him to munch the leaves and eat. I mean, we couldn't demonstrate it due to paucity of time. I mean, you will see if you look at resume, you can make certain hypotheses of the candidate. You may not, you should never come to a conclusion. Incorrect. That is incorrect. I remember after I started my consulting career, one very large organization, very corporate organization. One of their persons, I think HR or somebody approached me and said, "See, boss, we want you as a consultant. Can you send me a CV?" I said, "See, I don't have a CV. I haven't written one since I have quit my corporate career." He said, "No, please write one." So I wrote one Word document saying 10 things that you need to know about Deepak Kumar. And sent it. He says, "Oh, it will reject ho jayega. What is this? This is not a CV. This is not a resume. Ye to acceptable nahi hoga." I said, "See, in your organization, if this is not enough and you want me to consult you on branding, I will stay away from you because you people are only looking at things which has been done for ages and not looking at things which can be done differently. And branding consulting is all about that." So the point that I'm trying to make is the fundamental rule of any communication, whether written or verbal, is that it is meant for the person who is receiving the communication. So if the person who is receiving the communication is unable to decipher it the way the sender is intending that person to do, the communication is ineffective. That's the singular yardstick that we use. So resume is actually a written communication about me as a candidate to Sumit as a recruiter to know more about me. Now, if I write a 10-page resume, first of all, I'm asking Sumit to devote more time than he will devote to somebody who has sent a 2-page CV. Point number one. Point number two, I have always believed, and there is no statistical data, it's just my experience which suggests people who are more solid have less to write on the resume, and people who are not so solid have more to write on the resume. I have seen people who have worked, let's say, 10 years in an organization, and they have joined as, let's say, executive. So one chapter is executive. Next chapter is senior executive. Chapter after that is junior manager. Chapter after that is manager. The chapter after that is senior manager. What is the person applying for? He is applying for a CEO's position. Am I really bothered about what he did as a executive? So the point that I'm trying to make is that don't get impressed by the resume. Okay, photograph in a resume. Lot of people, you can make out if that photograph is taken as a natural photograph or is it a photograph taken to impress people. You will know that depending on the composition of the photograph, the lighting, dress, look into the camera, etc., etc. So somebody who believes that the way the person looks, and I'm talking gender neutral, is an important consideration for selection, please evaluate that person in that manner. People will write percentage of class 10th only, 67%, and then no percentages. Why? Because that is inferior to 67%. Either you don't write 67 or you write for all. So what are you saying? It's not about whether you're writing or not. What am I trying to say? This is a person whose integrity is which I will question. This is a person who will conceal if that suits his purpose. Do you agree? And that is integrity issue. So you talked of integrity. So these are small things about this. So a lot of things which have, suddenly there's a gap in the career. Not explained. References. Mahua came to that point. References will be provided if required, which is fair. Which is fair. You ask them that, okay, I want you references. Only the boss in the previous to previous organization, which is historical. It is impossible that you can give the reference of your current boss. Then you are looking for a job unless you have such an understanding with your boss that, boss, I am looking for a job. I will give you as my reference. If somebody calls you, tell good things about me. Then there is a got up in between the two of them. So reference has to be done by people who are neutral to the role that you are applying for. Reference has to be done in industry. Let me give an example. If I am recruiting a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company or an FMCG company, I will do the reference check in the market where he is working. I'll go to the counters and ask them, "This company se kaun banda aata hai?" And if that sales manager's name comes up, he is a man of the market, and that's what we want. Do you agree with me? So there are different ways of checking references, and that will depend on the job role that you are talking about. If you are recruiting somebody in the finance function who's a chartered accountant, I will go to the company where he has done his internship, first apprenticeship, because that person will be able to comment on two very important things. One is resilience, because chartered accountancy requires resilience, and second is willingness to learn, because that is when you do the most repetitive work, which is auditing and things like that. That person, that is the quality that you're looking for. So depending on what you are looking for, I will go for that. For example, if you're recruiting a faculty member, if the person has worked in any other academic institute and you can have access to students on that institute, I will ask that, who's the most popular commerce faculty? What is the name? And if you ask which commerce faculty's class is always attended by most of the people, both are different questions. Popularity has got nothing to do with class participation. It may have correlation, but that you can be popular by not being an effective teacher also. So you need to check for what you want to check. Psychometric test, just to continue what we started with the DISC. If you do, for example, that DISC test in 10 minutes before the interview and then ask questions around that, what is the purpose? Are you trying to see if the DISC test is giving correct results or not? Is that the purpose? That's not the purpose anyway. So the point that I'm trying to make is we must be very, very clear in terms of how do we look below the water, what is there in the iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg only helps you to navigate the iceberg. Whether you will go around it, how much far away will you go around it, how close will you go to it, and things like that, and nothing beyond. So I think in selection and recruitment, what is key is to look at what is below the water of the iceberg. The more you can assess that objectively, the more you can understand in perspective to the job role for which you are recruiting a person, the more you can unearth what is the deep within that person, the higher the probability that you will be able to recruit right. The question is, all these 2 tools and tests. My theory is very simple. If only tools could help you make the right recruitment, then we would have needed only computers to recruit. None of us would have been required. And there are elements which a computer can never pick up, which a human being can pick up when the person is assessing. Finally, last but not the least, I think all of us are in our careers in a position where we may look for jobs as we go forward. If you are preparing for a selection in any other organization or any other role, I hope what we discussed today will give you some preview into the way how recruiters could be thinking while recruiting. That is all from our side, Sumit and I. It's 5 o'clock, 5:06, which is more than 96 minutes of your precious time that we have consumed. And thank you for being with us. These conversations will continue. We are open to taking more questions. However, I have only one request, both of us, before we close the session. We will stop sharing the slides. We want all of you to be with the cameras on so that we can take a picture with all of you. Thank you, Joy, for the appreciation. That's me. I hope I still look similar to what the photograph says. This is another area of the CV, photograph on the CV. Is it as archaic as the one there versus what I am now? And that's also another way of judging people. Huh? There are a lot of ways of doing so. So we are there if you want to connect with us. And we will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And while we ask questions, I request all of you to switch on your camera so that we can take a group photograph of all of us attending this. Please do write to us, give us feedback on these sessions. We do it every month. We believe that people matter most in this world in whichever way we look at life, and whatever we can do to make the correct judgment of people, get more out of people, is the only objective of these sessions. We thoroughly enjoyed doing these sessions. Do write to us in case you have any suggestions on topics that you would like us to tackle in this. This is purely related to people management. It is not, we will not talk on anything else apart from this. So if I could have all the videos, please, then we could quickly have a photograph. Sumit, you have to do the needful because I'm technically challenged.
Yeah.
Kavita, BC, follow me. Shuman, all of you, please. So Panchatapa, we will meet hopefully shortly. My team has met you, I believe, yesterday or day before.
Yes, we did meet, yeah.
How did you find the session? Did you like the session?
It was delightful. Yes, of course. It was very enlightening and very...
I would have been happier if you had said the word useful.
Yes, yeah, useful, of course.
Now,
it was great meeting your team at Guwahati.
Yeah, I mean, I know. That's what hopefully we'll work together someday and we'll see each other more. And then when you meet me more, then you will say, how this guy should not be.
No, we were supposed to get an email. We were supposed to get a mail regarding some of the requirement. So hope we'll be getting it soon.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening, and it was wonderful talking to you all. Mahua, thank you for all the delightful questions. It always pushes me to sort of answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Have a nice evening.